The autumn rain fell steadily over Bellingham, Washington, soaking the wooden docks and turning the streets into ribbons of reflected light. It was October 1997, and the small city wedged between the Cascade Mountains and Bellingham Bay had always felt like a place where everyone knew everyone else's business. That made what happened to 17-year-old Marcus Chen all the more impossible to comprehend. One Friday evening, he walked out of Seahome High School after basketball practice, climbed into his older brother's Honda Civic, and simply vanished. No witnesses, no struggles, no goodbye. The car was found 2 days later in the parking lot of Whatcom Falls Park, keys still in the ignition, Marcus's backpack on the passenger seat with his wallet, homework, and a half-eaten granola bar inside. It was as if he had stepped out to stretch his legs and been swallowed by the October mist. Marcus's parents, James and Linda Chen, were second-generation Chinese Americans who ran a small seafood restaurant on Holly Street downtown. They had built their life in Bellingham with the kind of quiet determination that didn't ask for attention or pity. Now, standing in the police station 3 days after their son disappeared, they looked smaller somehow, as though grief had physically diminished them. Detective Sarah Halloway, a 15-year veteran of the Bellingham Police Department, took their statement with the practiced compassion of someone who had seen too many missing persons cases. She assured them that teenage boys sometimes ran away, that Marcus might surface in Seattle or Portland within days. But even as she spoke those words, something in her gut told her this was different. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment telling us where you're from. Your support helps us bring more of these stories to light. Now, let's continue with what happened to Marcus Chen. The search began immediately. Volunteers from the community fanned out across Whatcom County, checking the trails around Lake Whatcom, the dense forests of Larrabee State Park, and the industrial areas near the waterfront. Marcus's older brother David, 23, and working as a software engineer in Seattle, took emergency leave and returned home. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He kept replaying that Friday in his mind. He had lent Marcus the car because his own had been in the shop, a simple favor that now felt like a curse. David walked the trails of Whatcom Falls Park until his feet blistered, calling his brother's name until his voice gave out. The park ranger, an older man named Tom Bridger, who had worked there for 30 years, joined the searches and admitted he'd never seen anything like this. The park had hidden corners, sure, ravines and thick brush, but they'd combed through it all. There was no trace. Marcus had been a good kid by all accounts. He maintained a solid B average, played point guard on the varsity basketball team, and worked weekend shifts at his parents' restaurant, charming customers with his easy smile and quick wit. His friends described him as loyal, maybe a little quiet, but someone you could count on. There was no history of depression, no drug use, no secret girlfriend or boyfriend that might explain a sudden departure. His best friend, Ryan Kowalski, told Detective Halloway that Marcus had been excited about an upcoming basketball tournament and had been talking about applying to the University of Washington. Nothing about his behavior in the days before suggested he was planning to disappear. As the weeks turned into months, the media attention faded. The local newspaper, the Bellingham Herald, ran a few follow-up stories, but by Christmas, Marcus Chen's disappearance had become another cold case in a filing cabinet. The family refused to give up. Linda Chen kept Marcus's room exactly as he'd left it. His basketball trophies lined up on the shelf, his Sonics poster still taped to the wall. James worked longer hours at the restaurant, throwing himself into the rhythm of orders and prep work to avoid the silence at home. David, racked with guilt, hired a private investigator named Ellen Marsh, a former Seattle PD detective who specialized in missing persons cases. Ellen was methodical and tireless, re-interviewing everyone Marcus knew, checking credit card records, hospital admissions, even John Doe reports from surrounding states. She found nothing. It was as if Marcus had ceased to exist the moment he stepped out of that car. Detective Holloway never closed the case in her mind. She kept the file on her desk, reviewing it during slow shifts, looking for the details she might have missed. She drove out to Whatcom Falls Park on her days off, walking the same trails, studying the same parking lot where the Honda had been found. The park covered more than 200 acres of dense forest, waterfalls, and winding creeks. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way, but it also had a dark history. In the 1990s, there had been occasional reports of transients camping in the more remote sections, and once, back in 1983, a woman's body had been found near the lower falls. Holloway wondered if Marcus had encountered someone dangerous that night, someone who had left no evidence behind. But without a body, without witnesses, without even a theory that held water, the case remained a maddening blank. The Chen family's grief became a part of the fabric of Bellingham. People in the community would see Linda at the grocery store and offer sympathetic nods, unsure what to say after so much time had passed. Marcus's former teammates dedicated their 1998 season to him, wearing black armbands during games. David moved back to Bellingham permanently, unable to return to his life in Seattle while his brother's fate remained unknown. He took a job at a local tech startup and spent his evenings helping his parents at the restaurant. The guilt never left him. He replayed that Friday over and over. What if he hadn't lent Marcus the car? What if he had driven him home himself? The what-ifs were a kind of torture with no resolution. By the time 3 years had passed, the case was all but forgotten by everyone except the Chen family and Detective Holloway. The autumn of 2000 arrived with the same cold rains that had marked Marcus's disappearance. The world was preparing for a new millennium. Y2K fears had come and gone, and Bellingham continued its steady transformation from a working-class timber town into a hub for outdoor enthusiasts and college students attending Western Washington University. Life moved forward, indifferent to the unresolved tragedies left in its wake. It was a crisp October morning when Tom Bridger, the park ranger, was leading a routine trail maintenance crew through a section of Whatcom Falls Park, known locally as Forest Hollow. This area was rarely visited by casual hikers. It required a steep descent from the main trail and was thick with Douglas fir and western red cedar, the undergrowth choked with ferns and blackberry bushes. The crew was clearing fallen trees when one of the younger rangers, a college student named Mike Torres, called out. He had found something wedged between two moss-covered boulders, partially buried under 3 years of fallen leaves and forest debris. At first, he thought it was just an old camping bag, but as he pulled it free, he realized it was a backpack, badly weathered but still intact. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a Washington state driver's license. The name on the license was Marcus Chen. Tom Bridger's hands shook as he radioed the police station. Within an hour, Detective Holloway arrived with a forensics team. The discovery of the backpack changed everything. This wasn't the same backpack that had been found in Marcus's car 3 years earlier. This was a different one, which meant Marcus had been in Forest Hollow after his disappearance. The team conducted a careful search of the immediate area, marking off a grid and moving slowly through the underbrush. What they found next would haunt everyone involved for years to come. Approximately 50 yards from where the backpack was discovered, partially concealed by a rotting log and a tangle of roots, they found human remains. The bones were scattered, disturbed by animals over the years, but the forensics team carefully collected every fragment. A skull, ribs, long bones, enough to confirm that these were the remains of a young male, approximately 5'10", consistent with Marcus Chen's description. The clothing that remained, shreds of a dark jacket, fragments of jeans, matched what Marcus had been wearing the night he disappeared. But what struck Detective Halloway as she stood in that dark hollow, listening to the creek burble nearby, was the location itself. This wasn't a place someone stumbled into by accident. This was deep in the park, far from any established trail. Marcus would have had to deliberately hike here, or been brought here by someone else. The medical examiner's preliminary report would take weeks, but one detail was immediately apparent to the forensics team at the scene. The skull showed evidence of blunt force trauma, a fracture on the left temple that could have been caused by a fall or by being struck with a heavy object. The placement of the remains, the distance from the parking lot where his car had been found, the remote location of Forest Hollow, none of it suggested suicide or a simple accident. Detective Halloway knew in that moment that Marcus Chen's disappearance had never been a runaway case. This had been a homicide all along. The discovery sent shockwaves through Bellingham. The Bellingham Herald ran the story on the front page, and within hours, news crews from Seattle descended on the small city. The Chen family received the news in their living room, Detective Halloway delivering it herself because she couldn't bear the thought of them hearing it from anyone else. Linda Chen collapsed into her husband's arms, a sound escaping her throat that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of 3 years of hoping finally breaking apart. David sat on the couch, staring at his hands, and said nothing at all. In some terrible way, they had known. Every parent of a missing child knows, somewhere deep in the unspoken places of the heart, but knowing and having it confirmed are two entirely different kinds of pain. Detective Halloway returned to the police station and reopened the case file with a new sense of purpose. This was no longer a missing person investigation. This was a murder investigation, and she had 3 years of lost time to make up for. She started from the beginning, re-examining every statement, every lead, every dead end. The discovery of Marcus's remains in Forest Hollow raised immediate questions. How had he gotten there? The car had been found at the main parking lot, nearly 1.5 miles away through dense forest. Had he walked there himself, meeting someone? Had he been forced? And most critically, who had wanted Marcus Chen dead? Ellen Marsh, the private investigator David had hired 3 years earlier, came back into the picture. She had never stopped thinking about the case, and the discovery of the remains vindicated her instinct that something criminal had occurred. Together, she and Detective Halloway began reconstructing Marcus's final hours. They started with the last known sighting, Marcus leaving basketball practice at approximately 6:30 on that Friday evening in October 1997. The gym teacher, Coach Williams, remembered Marcus joking with teammates about an upcoming game against Mount Vernon High School. He seemed normal, happy even. Marcus had walked to the parking lot alone, climbed into his brother's Honda, and driven away. No one saw him after that. The detective and the investigator drove the route from Seahome High School to Whatcom Falls Park, timing it 8 minutes. It was early evening in October, so it would have been getting dark, but not fully dark yet. Why would Marcus have driven to the park instead of home? His house was in the opposite direction. Halloway pulled up the original case file and found an interview with Marcus's girlfriend at the time, a girl named Jennifer Park, who had graduated the year before and was attending community college. Jennifer had told police that she and Marcus had broken up 2 weeks before his disappearance, amicably, because she was focused on school and he was busy with basketball. But now, 3 years later, Halloway wondered if there was more to that story. They found Jennifer working as a barista at a coffee shop near the university campus. She was 20 now, studying to be a nurse, and when Halloway and Marsh approached her, she immediately began to cry. She had heard about the discovery of Marcus's remains on the news. Sitting in a corner booth, Jennifer revealed something she had been too scared to tell police 3 years earlier. 2 days before Marcus disappeared, she had received a threatening phone call from an unknown male voice telling her to stay away from Marcus, or there would be consequences. She had assumed it was a prank, maybe one of Marcus's teammates playing a stupid joke. She hadn't told Marcus because they were broken up and she didn't want to seem dramatic. But when he disappeared, she had been terrified that somehow her silence had contributed to whatever happened. She had told herself it couldn't be connected, that it was just coincidence. Now, sitting across from a detective and a private investigator, she realized how wrong she might have been. This changed everything. The threatening phone call suggested premeditation, jealousy, or some kind of targeted violence. Holloway immediately began pulling phone records from October 1997, a painstaking process that required court orders and cooperation from phone companies whose systems had changed significantly in 3 years. Meanwhile, Ellen Marsh began interviewing Marcus's former teammates and friends again, this time asking specifically about conflicts, jealousies, or anyone who might have had a problem with Marcus. What emerged was a picture of a popular kid who nonetheless had made at least one enemy. Ryan Kowalski, Marcus's best friend, finally opened up about something he had kept quiet for 3 years. There had been tension between Marcus and another player on the basketball team, a senior named Tyler Brennan. Tyler had been the starting point guard before Marcus, a freshman at the time, had proven himself to be faster and more skilled. Coach Williams had made the difficult decision to bench Tyler in favor of Marcus during their sophomore year tournament. Tyler had taken it hard, his college scholarship hopes dimming with reduced playing time. There had been arguments in the locker room, pushing matches that coaches had broken up. Ryan admitted he had always wondered if Tyler's resentment ran deeper than anyone realized, but Tyler had graduated in 1996 and left Bellingham, so Ryan had never mentioned it to police. It had seemed irrelevant. Detective Holloway tracked down Tyler Brennan's current location. He was living in Spokane, working construction, his basketball dreams long abandoned. When she and Marsh drove the 4 hours across Washington state to interview him, they found a man whose life had not gone the way he had planned. Tyler was defensive at first, angry that they were dredging up high school drama from years ago, but as Holloway pressed him about his whereabouts on the night Marcus disappeared, his story began to fall apart. He claimed he had been in Spokane that entire autumn, but when Holloway checked with his former employer, she discovered Tyler had been fired from a job in Bellingham in early November 1997, 2 weeks after Marcus disappeared. Tyler had lied about his timeline. Confronted with this inconsistency, Tyler's demeanor shifted. He became agitated, pacing the small apartment, and finally admitted he had been in Bellingham that October. He'd come back to visit friends, to see a girl he'd been dating, to escape the dead-end life he was building in Spokane. But he swore he had nothing to do with Marcus's disappearance. Holloway pressed harder, and Tyler's lawyer advised him to stop talking. The interview ended there, but Holloway left with a clear suspect and a renewed determination to build a case. The forensic evidence from Forest Hollow was processed slowly and carefully. The medical examiner confirmed that the blunt force trauma to Marcus's skull had been the cause of death, likely instantaneous. The angle and severity of the fracture suggested he had been struck from behind with a heavy, rounded object, possibly a rock or a piece of wood. There were no defensive wounds on the remaining bones, which suggested Marcus had been taken by surprise. The backpack found at the scene contained a few items that provided crucial clues. A crumpled receipt from a gas station dated the night of Marcus's disappearance, a disposable camera with undeveloped film still inside, and a handwritten note that simply read, "Meet me at the falls at 7. We need to talk." The note was in Marcus's handwriting, which meant he had written it himself, possibly as a reminder. But who had he been planning to meet? The gas station receipt was from a Shell station on Lakeway Drive, time-stamped at 6:53. That placed Marcus alive and alone less than 10 minutes before the supposed meeting time. Detective Holloway obtained surveillance footage from the gas station, a grainy, low-quality tape that had been archived but not destroyed. The footage showed Marcus pumping gas, going inside to pay, and then standing by his car for a moment, looking at something in his hand. A phone? A piece of paper? The resolution was too poor to tell, but what the footage did show was another vehicle pulling into the station just as Marcus was leaving. A dark-colored pickup truck, distinctive because of a dented front fender. Holloway felt her pulse quicken. Tyler Brennan drove a pickup truck. The case began to come together piece by piece. Holloway obtained a warrant to search Tyler's vehicle, now 7 years old and showing significant wear. The forensics team found nothing definitive. No blood, no fibers that matched Marcus's clothing. But in the truck's glove compartment, they found something interesting. An old Whatcom Falls Park trail map, folded and marked with pencil annotations. One of the marks corresponded almost exactly to the location of Forest Hollow, where Marcus's remains had been found. When confronted with this evidence, Tyler finally requested a lawyer and refused to say another word. The district attorney reviewed the evidence. The threatening phone call to Jennifer, Tyler's motive, and his lies about his whereabouts, the gas station footage, the trail map, and the timing of everything. It was circumstantial, but it was building. What they needed was the disposable camera. The film was sent to a specialized lab that could develop decades-old film stock. When the images came back, they provided the final piece of the puzzle. The camera contained photos Marcus had taken during the week before his disappearance. Basketball practice, friends goofing around, pictures of his parents at the restaurant. But the last two photos were different. They showed the interior of a vehicle, taken from the passenger seat. The angle was awkward, as if Marcus had been trying to photograph something without being obvious. And in the driver's seat, partially visible, was a figure in a dark jacket. The forensics team enhanced the image, and while the face wasn't clear, the distinctive dented fender of the truck was visible through the windshield. It matched Tyler's truck exactly. The theory that emerged was this. Tyler had called Marcus, asking to meet at Whatcom Falls Park to talk, perhaps framing it as wanting to clear the air about their past conflicts. Marcus, ever the decent kid, had agreed. He had stopped for gas on the way, and Tyler had followed him, staying close. Marcus may have sensed something was wrong, hence the surreptitious photos, but he had gone to the meeting anyway. At the falls, in the growing darkness of an October evening, Tyler had led Marcus into Forest Hollow, perhaps under the pretense of wanting privacy. And there, in that remote and shadowed place, Tyler had struck Marcus from behind with a rock or a heavy branch, killing him instantly. Tyler had then concealed the body, scattering leaves and debris over it, and left the area. He had taken Marcus's car keys and driven the Honda back to the main parking lot, leaving it there to make it look like Marcus had simply walked away. Then Tyler had disappeared into the night, eventually fleeing to Spokane to escape the guilt and suspicion. Tyler Brennan was arrested in January 2001 and charged with second-degree murder. The trial took place in Whatcom County Superior Court that spring, and the courtroom was packed every day. The prosecution laid out their case methodically: motive, opportunity, physical evidence, and the damning photos from Marcus's camera. Tyler's defense attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the photos didn't definitively show Tyler, that the trail map could have been from any camping trip, but the jury saw through it. After 3 days of deliberation, they returned a guilty verdict. Tyler Brennan was sentenced to 28 years in prison. The Chen family attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row, holding hands, bearing witness to the truth of what had happened to their son. When the verdict was read, Linda Chen wept, not with relief, but with the exhausting finality of it all. James held her close, his face a mask of stoic grief that had become permanent over the years. David sat between them, his own tears silent, thinking about all the time lost, all the what-ifs that would never have answers. After the trial, Detective Holloway approached the family and told them she was sorry it had taken so long, sorry they had to live with uncertainty for 3 years. Linda Chen took the detective's hand and thanked her for never giving up. It was a small moment of grace in an ocean of sorrow. Marcus Chen was buried in Bayview Cemetery, overlooking Bellingham Bay, the same cemetery where generations of the city's families rested. The funeral was held on a bright April day, the kind of day when the San Juan Islands are visible in the distance and the air smells of salt and pine. Hundreds of people attended, former classmates, teachers, basketball teammates, customers from the restaurant, and strangers who had followed the case and wanted to pay their respects. The basketball team from Seahome High School formed an honor guard, and Marcus's number was officially retired in a ceremony that left everyone in tears. David gave the eulogy, speaking about his brother's kindness, his terrible jokes, his dream of playing college ball, and the hole his absence had left in all their lives. He spoke about forgiveness, about trying to move forward, about the importance of cherishing the people you love while they're still here. In the years that followed, the Chen family found ways to honor Marcus's memory. They established a scholarship fund in his name for student athletes at Seahome High School, awarded annually to a player who demonstrated both skill and character. Linda and James continued running their restaurant, which became a gathering place for the community, a place where people shared stories and supported one another through life's hardships. David eventually married and had children of his own, naming his first son Marcus. He taught his children about the uncle they would never meet, keeping the memory alive through stories and photographs. Detective Sarah Holloway retired from the Bellingham Police Department in 2008, her career defined in many ways by the Marcus Chen case. She had solved other crimes, closed other cases, but this one had tested her in ways she never forgot. She kept a photograph of Marcus on her desk throughout her career, a reminder of why the work mattered, why persistence and attention to detail could mean the difference between justice and oblivion. Ellen Marsh, the private investigator, continued her work with missing persons cases, driven by the belief that every family deserved answers, deserved closure, deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful. Forest Hollow remains a quiet, shadowed place in Whatcom Falls Park, marked now by a small memorial plaque placed by the Chen family and the city of Bellingham. Hikers who find their way there sometimes leave flowers or small tokens, honoring a boy they never knew, but whose story touched them nonetheless. The park itself continues to be a place of beauty and recreation, families picnicking by the falls, children splashing in the creek, nature indifferent to human tragedy. But those who know the history walk through differently, aware that beneath the moss and ferns and towering trees lies a story of violence and loss, of justice delayed but finally served. The story of Marcus Chen's disappearance and the shocking discovery 3 years later in Forest Hollow became part of Bellingham's collective memory, a cautionary tale about the fragility of life and the importance of community. It reminded people that evil can wear a familiar face, that jealousy and resentment can metastasize into something monstrous, and that the truth, no matter how long buried, eventually finds its way to the surface. For the Chen family, the resolution brought a measure of peace, though the wound of losing Marcus never fully healed. They learned to live with the grief, to carry it as part of themselves, and to find meaning in keeping his memory alive. In the end, Marcus Chen was not forgotten. He was remembered, honored, and loved, his story a testament to the enduring power of a family's devotion and a community's refusal to let one of their own disappear without answers.